My beloved child. Stop scrolling for a moment, because what you are about to hear was meant to find you at a very specific moment in your life. You may think you clicked on this message by accident. You may think these words simply appeared in front of you while you were passing time, searching for something to listen to, or trying to distract yourself from the thoughts that have been circling inside your heart. But pause here for a moment. There is something you need to understand before you move forward. Someone has been carrying a version of your story that was never the truth. Someone heard something about you. Someone believed something about you. Someone repeated something about you. And the person whose heart matters most in this story has just discovered that the story they were given was not the story that actually happened. Your soulmate has just found out who lied about you. And my child, they are furious. Not the kind of furious that disappears after a few minutes. Not the kind of anger that comes from wounded pride. This is the anger that rises when someone suddenly realizes they judged a person they cared about using information that was deliberately twisted. They are replaying conversations in their mind. They are remembering things you said. They are remembering moments when you looked into their eyes and tried to explain yourself. They are remembering the times you became quiet instead of defending yourself. And now they are asking themselves one painful question. Why didn't I listen to them? You may not know what has happened behind the scenes. You may not know what conversation took place. You may not know what truth finally came to light. But there has been a shift. Something that was hidden is becoming visible. Something that was confusing is beginning to make sense. Something that made you look guilty in another person's eyes is starting to reveal itself as a carefully constructed misunderstanding. And this is where your story becomes deeper than you realize. Because my child, you were never abandoned simply because someone misunderstood you. You were never forgotten simply because someone believed a lie. You were never made less valuable because another person's words temporarily changed the way someone looked at you. You were simply walking through a chapter where truth had to survive without your constant explanation. And that chapter is changing. Perhaps you remember the moment everything became strange. Perhaps there was a sudden distance. A colder tone. A message that stopped coming. A conversation that never happened. A person who used to look at you with warmth suddenly began looking at you with suspicion. Maybe you tried to understand it. Maybe you searched through old conversations. Maybe you asked yourself what you had done wrong. Maybe you blamed yourself for something you could not even identify. You wondered whether you had said too much. Whether you had said too little. Whether you had waited too long. Whether you should have reached out. Whether you should have walked away. And eventually, exhaustion took over. You stopped trying to prove yourself. You stopped trying to convince anyone. You told yourself that if someone truly cared, they would eventually see the truth. And my child, that decision changed everything. Because while you were becoming silent, the truth was moving. You could not see it. You could not control it. You could not force it. But it was moving. The person who lied may have believed they had control over the story. They may have thought that if they spoke first, their version would become reality. They may have presented themselves as concerned. They may have acted as though they were protecting your soulmate from you. They may have said, "I'm only telling you because I care." They may have disguised jealousy as advice. They may have disguised insecurity as concern. They may have disguised manipulation as honesty. And because your soulmate trusted them, even temporarily, their words found a place in their mind. But lies have one weakness. They require maintenance. Truth does not. A lie needs another explanation when the first explanation stops making sense. Then another explanation. Then another. Eventually, the contradictions begin appearing. And that is exactly what happened. Your soulmate began noticing things that did not fit. A detail here. A contradiction there. A memory that did not match what they had been told. A message. A conversation. A piece of information that suddenly changed the entire meaning of something that happened before. And then came the moment. The moment when your soulmate realized, wait. Just one word. But sometimes one word can break an entire illusion. Wait. They went back through the story. They looked at it differently. They remembered your face. They remembered your silence. They remembered how you never attacked the person who was supposedly telling the truth about you. And suddenly your silence looked different. It no longer looked like guilt. It looked like pain. Your distance no longer looked like indifference. It looked like someone protecting their heart. Your refusal to argue no longer looked suspicious. It looked like someone who had grown tired of begging to be believed. And something inside your soulmate cracked. They realized that while they were listening to someone else's version of you, you were somewhere carrying the consequences of a lie you did not create. That realization hurts. Especially when feelings are involved. Because your soulmate is not only angry at the person who lied. They are angry with themselves. They are asking why they allowed someone else's words to become more powerful than their own experience with you. They are asking why they questioned your character. Why they believed something without giving you the chance to explain. Why they let distance grow. Why they allowed another person's opinion to interfere with something that was supposed to be between two hearts. And my child, this is why you may feel something strange around this connection. You may feel that something has changed even though you cannot point to a physical event. You may suddenly think about them after days of not thinking about them. You may dream about them. You may feel an unusual emotional pull. You may hear a song that reminds you of them. You may encounter their name unexpectedly. You may remember a conversation that you had completely buried. Do not assume every coincidence is a supernatural sign. But understand this. Emotionally, unresolved connections have a way of resurfacing when the truth finally becomes impossible to ignore. And your story has reached that point. Your soulmate has begun revisiting the past. Not because they want to torture themselves. Because they want answers. They want to know what really happened. And the deeper they look, the more uncomfortable it becomes. Because the truth does not simply expose the liar. It exposes the consequences of believing the lie. Your soulmate is beginning to understand how much their actions may have hurt you. They remember moments when you needed understanding and received distance. They remember times when you tried to communicate and they interpreted your words through someone else's accusations. They remember when you stopped reaching out. And now they wonder whether that silence was the moment they lost your trust. My child, there is something beautiful about truth. Truth does not need to scream. It does not need to chase people. It does not need to create a performance. Truth can sit quietly in a room while everyone else argues. And eventually, when the noise disappears, truth is still there. You have been there. Still standing. Still breathing. Still becoming. Still healing. Still moving forward. And now the person who once looked at you through someone else's story is beginning to look at you directly. That is why their anger is so intense. Because they are realizing that the person they trusted was not simply mistaken. There is a difference between misunderstanding someone and deliberately creating a misunderstanding. There is a difference between repeating something you heard and intentionally shaping someone's perception. There is a difference between concern and control. Your soulmate is beginning to see that difference. And once you see manipulation clearly, it becomes difficult to unsee. They are asking themselves what else was hidden. What else was exaggerated? What else was intentionally left out? And this is where another revelation begins. Because the lie was not necessarily created because you were unworthy. Sometimes people lie about what they fear losing. Sometimes jealousy appears when someone believes they cannot compete with the connection between two people. Sometimes insecurity makes a person interfere in relationships they were never supposed to control. Sometimes someone sees the potential of a bond and becomes frightened by their own lack of influence. The person who lied about you may have had motives you never knew. Perhaps they wanted your soulmate's attention. Perhaps they wanted to protect their position. Perhaps they were afraid your presence would change a relationship they valued. Perhaps they wanted to make themselves appear trustworthy by making you appear dangerous. Perhaps they simply could not tolerate seeing your soulmate care about you. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. Your name became the subject of conversations you were not present for. Your character became something other people debated. Your intentions were interpreted without your voice. And you were left wondering why someone you loved suddenly seemed so far away. But listen carefully, my child. You do not need to become obsessed with discovering every detail. You do not need to hunt down the person who lied. You do not need to confront everyone. You do not need to create revenge. Your assignment is not revenge. Your assignment is restoration. Let truth reveal what lies concealed. Let time expose what manipulation tried to protect. Let people face the consequences of their own decisions. And most importantly, do not allow someone else's dishonesty to transform you into someone you are not. Do not become bitter because someone was cruel. Do not become suspicious of everyone because one person betrayed trust. Do not close every door because one person slammed one. Your heart deserves protection, but it also deserves peace. And your soulmate is learning that lesson right now. They are realizing that your heart was never the enemy. They are realizing that the person they should have questioned was not you. And this realization is producing an emotional storm inside them. They are angry. They are embarrassed. They are disappointed. They are confused. And beneath all of it, there is something else. Regret. Deep regret. They may not know how to approach you. They may not know whether you would even listen. They may wonder if you have moved on emotionally. They may wonder whether you still care. They may fear that their opportunity has passed. And that fear is forcing them to confront something they avoided for a long time. They cannot undo what happened. They cannot erase the days of silence. They cannot delete the moments when you felt misunderstood. They cannot simply walk back into your life and pretend nothing happened. And they know it. That is why they are hesitating. Not necessarily because they do not care. But because they are beginning to understand the weight of what they did. They know that an apology cannot magically erase pain. They know that saying, "I was wrong," is easy compared with rebuilding trust. They know that you may have changed. And they are right about one thing. You have changed. But not in the way they fear. You have changed because you survived something that taught you your worth cannot depend on being believed by everyone. You have changed because you learned that sometimes the strongest response is silence. You have changed because you stopped chasing people who were determined to misunderstand you. You have changed because you finally understood that love without trust becomes a prison. And that lesson will matter if your soulmate returns. Because if they come back, you cannot simply return to the old version of yourself. You cannot become the person who constantly explains, constantly reassures, constantly proves, constantly waits. If reconciliation is meant to happen, it must happen between two people who have grown. Not between the old you and the old version of them. And your soulmate is beginning to realize that they are not only thinking about you. They are thinking about who they were when they lost you. That is a painful mirror. And perhaps the most surprising part is that the person who lied may now be nervous. Because your soulmate's questions are becoming sharper. The story they once accepted without hesitation is being examined. What exactly did you mean when you said that? When did this happen? Why didn't you tell me this part? Why did you never mention that? Why does their version not match what I remember? And every question creates another crack. The liar may attempt to defend themselves. They may say they were misunderstood. They may claim they were trying to help. They may accuse you of influencing your soulmate. They may even attempt to create another story to explain the first story. But now something has changed. Your soulmate is listening differently. Before, they listened to believe. Now, they listen to verify. That difference is enormous. Because once trust begins shifting, every contradiction becomes visible. And my child, there may be one specific piece of information that your soulmate has discovered that changed everything. Something small. Something seemingly insignificant. But it connected two events that never made sense before. Maybe it was a date. Maybe it was a message. Maybe it was something another person accidentally revealed. Maybe someone finally admitted that they had heard only one side. Maybe a conversation happened when your soulmate was not expecting it. Maybe they discovered that the person who accused you had been telling different versions of the same story to different people. Whatever form it took, the effect was powerful. Your soulmate suddenly realized that they had been standing on information that was never solid. And now they are furious. Not because they suddenly hate the liar. Because they suddenly understand how much damage was done. They are thinking about you. They are thinking about what you must have felt. And perhaps for the first time, they are imagining the story from your side. They imagine being accused without being heard. They imagine watching someone they love believe another person. They imagine trying to explain and realizing their words no longer mattered. They imagine the loneliness. And that imagination is hurting them. This is why you should not rush to force an outcome. Let them feel what they need to feel. Let them understand. Let them take responsibility. You have already carried enough. You do not need to carry their realization for them. You do not need to make them understand faster. You do not need to send 10 messages explaining what happened. Sometimes the greatest evidence of your truth is the fact that you no longer need to defend it. And listen, my beloved child, because this is important. If someone returns to you only because they are angry at the person who lied, that is not enough. Anger can open a door. But accountability must walk through it. Your soulmate must eventually understand that the real issue was not simply the lie. The real issue was why they were willing to believe it. That is where the healing begins. They must learn to trust their own experience with you. They must learn to communicate directly. They must learn not to allow third parties to become the authority over your relationship. They must learn that love cannot survive when outside voices are given more power than honest conversation. And you, my child, must learn something too. You must never again confuse being chosen with being worthy. You were worthy before they understood. You were worthy while they doubted. You were worthy while they walked away. You were worthy while someone else was telling your story incorrectly. Their recognition does not create your value. Their apology does not create your value. Their return does not create your value. You already had it. And perhaps this is why the separation had to teach you something. You thought you were losing them. But maybe you were losing the version of yourself who needed their approval. You thought the distance was punishment. But maybe the distance was protection. You thought silence meant the connection was dead. But perhaps silence gave truth enough room to emerge. And now the situation is shifting. Not because you forced it. Not because you begged. Not because you manipulated. But because falsehood eventually struggles under the weight of reality. Your soulmate is beginning to see you without the distortion. And that can be overwhelming. They may suddenly remember your kindness. The little things. The way you checked on them. The way you noticed details other people ignored. The way you stayed when you could have left. The way you tried to understand them even when they were difficult to understand. The way you gave them space when they needed it. The way you never wanted to embarrass them. The way you protected their dignity even when your own dignity was being questioned. And now they are asking themselves why they did not recognize those things earlier. This is where nostalgia becomes painful. Because memories do not argue. They simply return. A particular place. A particular song. A message. A photograph. A familiar phrase. A moment when you laughed. A moment when they looked at you and felt safe. All of those memories are returning with a new meaning. And suddenly the past is no longer supporting the lie. It is contradicting it. My child, that is a powerful moment. Because when someone has been manipulated into misunderstanding you, the truth does not always arrive as one giant revelation. Sometimes it arrives as hundreds of tiny realizations. Oh. That doesn't make sense. They wouldn't have done that. Why did I believe this? I remember something different. And eventually all those small realizations become one enormous conclusion. I was wrong about them. That conclusion is where your soulmate is standing. And now comes the part they are afraid to face. You. Not the memory of you. Not the version of you described by someone else. You. The real person. The person who may have moved forward. The person who may have stopped waiting. The person who may have learned to sleep peacefully without their messages. The person who may have built a life they never expected to build. The person who may still love them but no longer needs them. That is frightening for someone who realizes they almost lost something precious. Because regret becomes heavier when you realize the other person is no longer standing where you left them. Your soulmate may be wondering whether they still have a place in your life. And they may be wondering whether you will believe them if they finally tell you the truth. That is the irony. They once demanded proof from you. Now they may have to prove themselves to you. Not through dramatic promises. Not through emotional speeches. Through consistency. Through honesty. Through patience. Through actions. And this is where I want you to listen very carefully. Do not confuse urgency with destiny. Someone being furious does not automatically mean they are ready. Someone missing you does not automatically mean they have changed. Someone discovering a lie does not automatically erase the damage. If your soulmate comes back, let their actions speak. Let them show you who they are now. You do not need to punish them. But you also do not need to abandon your boundaries just because their heart is finally catching up with yours. Your heart can be compassionate and cautious at the same time. You can forgive without immediately restoring access. You can love someone without accepting the same behavior again. You can understand their regret without taking responsibility for their choices. This is maturity. This is healing. This is the new version of you. And perhaps your soulmate is beginning to recognize that version. They are not only seeing someone they lost. They are seeing someone who survived. And that realization is creating another wave of emotion. Because now they know the person who lied about you did not simply damage your reputation. They damaged something between two people. They interfered with a connection. They created confusion where there should have been communication. And your soulmate is angry because they now understand the cost. But there is something they have not yet told anyone. Something they may not even know how to say. They still care about you. Deeply. Perhaps more deeply than they allowed themselves to admit. The lie did not erase the feeling. It buried it beneath confusion. And now that confusion is disappearing. The feeling is rising again. That is why their emotions may feel so intense. They are not only angry. They are grieving. They are grieving the time that cannot be recovered. They are grieving conversations that never happened. They are grieving moments that could have been different. They are grieving the possibility that they may have pushed away someone who genuinely loved them. And beneath that grief is a quiet hope. What if I can still make this right? That question is becoming louder. But they are afraid of your answer. They are afraid you will say no. They are afraid you will say that you no longer trust them. They are afraid you will tell them that they had their chance. They are afraid that the person they once took for granted has finally realized they deserve better. And my child, perhaps that fear is exactly what they need. Not to suffer. Not to be punished. But to understand the seriousness of what trust requires. A person who truly loves you should not only fear losing you. They should fear becoming someone you can no longer safely trust. There is a difference. And your soulmate is beginning to understand it. The anger they feel toward the liar is only the surface. Underneath it is a confrontation with themselves. They are asking, why did I let this happen? Why didn't I ask them directly? Why did I believe someone else? Why did I allow pride to become stronger than love? Why did I walk away when I should have listened? And the final question hurts the most. Do they still have room for me? My child, you do not have to answer that question today. You do not have to decide the future today. You do not have to chase the connection. You do not have to prove that you still care. Let this moment breathe. Let the truth settle. Let the dust clear. Because there is still something hidden beneath everything you have heard so far. You may think the revelation was simply that your soulmate discovered someone lied about you. It is bigger than that. The discovery did not only reveal the liar. It revealed the reason your soulmate was vulnerable to that lie in the first place. And that reason reaches deeper than jealousy. Deeper than gossip. Deeper than misunderstanding. There is an old wound inside your soulmate that made them believe the worst before they believed the person they loved. That wound has been there longer than you. And the person who lied knew how to touch it. They knew which fear to activate. They knew which insecurity to whisper into. They knew what question would make your soulmate doubt you. And now your soulmate is realizing something terrifying. The lie worked because it connected to a fear they already carried. A fear of betrayal. A fear of abandonment. A fear of being made foolish. A fear of trusting the wrong person. A fear of loving someone who might eventually hurt them. And suddenly your soulmate is understanding that the lie was only the spark. The real fire was already inside them. This means the journey ahead is not simply about exposing a liar. It is about healing the part of their heart that allowed fear to become louder than truth. And that is why this story is not over. Because the next conversation will not simply be about what happened. It will be about what your soulmate intends to do now that they know. Will they confront the person who lied? Will they finally admit the truth? Will they reach out to you? Will they apologize? Will they tell you everything? Or will shame make them hide? These questions are now moving through their mind. And somewhere inside them, a decision is forming. They know silence cannot continue forever. They know pretending nothing happened is impossible. They know the truth has changed everything. And they know there is one person they eventually have to face. You. But before that happens, there is one final piece of the story that your soulmate has just discovered. One detail. One conversation. One truth that makes their anger even stronger. Because the person who lied about you did not simply misunderstand something you did. They knew something about you was true. They knew you cared. They knew your intentions were different from what they claimed. They knew there was a connection. And yet they chose to twist it anyway. That is the part your soulmate cannot stop thinking about. That is the part that made their heart turn cold toward the liar. Because now they understand this was not an innocent mistake. There was intention behind the distortion. And your soulmate is furious because they are finally seeing the betrayal from a completely different angle. But there is still one question. Why? Why would someone go that far? Why would they risk destroying a connection? Why would they spend so much energy creating a false story? What were they trying to protect? What were they trying to gain? And most importantly, what exactly did they tell your soulmate about you that caused everything to change? My beloved child, that answer is closer than you think. The truth is already moving toward the surface. Your soulmate has already heard the sentence that changes the entire story. And when they heard it, they finally realized who had been standing between you all this time. But they have not yet told you what was said. They are still holding that information inside. They are still deciding how to approach you. They are still battling their fear of your reaction. And somewhere, right now, their heart is asking the question that may determine everything that happens next. If I tell them the whole truth, will they still want me in their life? That is where we pause. Because the next revelation is not about the person who lied. It is about the truth your soulmate is preparing to confess to you, and the one thing they discovered about the lie that they never expected to uncover. And when that truth comes out, you will finally understand why their anger became impossible for them to hide.